Hey everybody! You know that big bright thing in the sky, the one we call the sun? Yeah, that one. It's pretty important, right? Gives us light, warmth, helps our plants grow, the whole shebang. But here's the thing about the sun. It's not always this peaceful ball of sunshine. Sometimes it gets a little, how do I put it, dramatic. Think of it like your favorite celebrity. One minute they're on the red carpet, all smiles, and the next minute, bam! They're throwing a phone at their assistant. The sun? It throws solar flares. Not at assistants, thankfully, but it's still pretty wild. So what are these solar flares I'm talking about? Imagine the biggest fireworks show you've ever seen. Now multiply that by like a gazillion. That's a solar flare. It's a sudden burst of energy from the sun, and it's seriously powerful. Now the good news is that the light from a solar flare reaches Earth pretty quickly, like in 8 minutes. The bad news? It also sends out a bunch of charged particles, and those little guys can take a couple of days to get here. And when they do, well, let's just say it can cause a bit of a ruckus. Radio signals go haywire, GPS gets confused, and if it's a really big flare, even our power grids can take a hit. Talk about a blackout. But wait, there's more. The sun is not just a giant ball of fire hanging out in space. It's a dynamic, ever-changing entity that can surprise us in the most unexpected ways. The sun doesn't just stop at flares. Those flares are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to solar activity. Sometimes it throws a full-on tantrum, and we're talking about coronal mass ejections, or CMEs for short. These are massive bursts of solar wind and magnetic fields rising above the solar corona or being released into space. Picture this. You're making spaghetti, and you accidentally fling a giant blob of sauce across the kitchen. It's messy, chaotic, and definitely not what you planned. That's kind of what a CME is like, except instead of spaghetti sauce, it's a massive eruption of plasma and magnetic fields from the sun. Imagine the sun just hurling a huge chunk of itself out into space. Not exactly what you want on your kitchen ceiling, right? Now imagine trying to clean that up. It's a monumental task, and in the case of the sun, it's not something we can just wipe away. And if a CME is aimed at Earth, well, that's when things get really interesting. These solar tantrums can have a direct impact on our planet. Hold on to your hats, folks, because it can cause a geomagnetic storm. These storms are like the sun's way of saying, hey, pay attention to me. These storms are like solar flares on steroids. They can be incredibly powerful and have far-reaching effects. They can mess up satellites, cause widespread power outages, and yeah, they can even make the northern lights extra spectacular. Imagine looking up at the night sky and seeing a light show like no other. So there's that at least. While CMEs can be disruptive, they also remind us of the incredible power and beauty of our sun. It's a reminder that we are just a small part of a much larger dynamic universe. Now, before you start packing your bags and moving underground, here's some good news. The sun doesn't have these outbursts all the time. It goes through phases, kind of like, well, us. The sun has an 11-year cycle, and during this cycle, its activity waxes and wanes. There are times when it's relatively calm and quiet, like it's meditating on a beach somewhere. And then there are times when it's more active, with more sunspots, more flares, and more CMEs. Think of it as the sun's version of a midlife crisis. Okay, so we've talked about the sun's dramatic outbursts, but what does it all mean for us here on Earth? The sun, our life-giving star, is not just a serene ball of light in the sky. It has a temper, and when it flares up, the effects can ripple across our planet in ways that are both fascinating and alarming. Well, as I mentioned before, solar storms, those geomagnetic disturbances caused by flares and CMEs, can have some pretty real-world effects. These storms can trigger beautiful auroras, but they can also wreak havoc on our technology. Remember the Carrington event back in 1859? That was a doozy. It was the most powerful geomagnetic storm on record, and it lit up the skies with auroras so bright that people could read newspapers by their light. A massive solar storm hit Earth, and it caused telegraph systems to go haywire. Telegraph operators reported sparks flying from their equipment, and some even caught fire. It was a dramatic demonstration of the sun's power. Sparks were flying, fires were starting. It was like something out of a sci-fi movie. Imagine the surprise and confusion of people back then, witnessing such an extraordinary event without the scientific understanding we have today. These days, we're much more reliant on technology than we were back then, so a Carrington-level event today could be, shall we say, inconvenient? Our modern world is interconnected and dependent on a vast array of electronic systems. Imagine a world without internet, cell phones, or even electricity for an extended period. No social media, no online shopping, no streaming services. Our daily routines would be upended in an instant. It wouldn't just be an inconvenience, it would be a major disruption to our way of life. Essential services like hospitals, transportation, and communication networks could be severely impacted. The economic and social consequences would be profound, highlighting just how vulnerable our advanced society is to the whims of our star. The good news is that we're not just sitting here, twiddling our thumbs and hoping for the best. Scientists are constantly monitoring the sun, using sophisticated telescopes and spacecraft to track its every move. It's kind of like having a space weather forecast, but instead of rain or snow, we're looking out for solar storms. And if they see something big heading our way, they can issue alerts so that we can take steps to protect our technology and infrastructure. You know, like a giant umbrella for Earth, but for solar storms. So what's been happening with our favorite star lately? Has it been throwing any tantrums? Well, the sun is always up to something, but there have been a few notable events in recent years. Remember that time in insert year when describe a recent solar event? That was pretty wild. And just a few months ago, in insert month year, there was describe another recent solar event. Luckily, it didn't cause too much disruption here on Earth, but it was a good reminder that our star is still full of surprises. So, after all that talk of solar flares, CMEs, and geomagnetic storms, you might be wondering if you should be investing in a lead-lined bunker. It's a natural reaction to be concerned when you hear about the potential for massive solar events that could disrupt our daily lives. The idea of a solar storm knocking out power grids, disrupting communications, and causing widespread chaos can be quite alarming. But let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. And the answer is probably not. While it's always good to be prepared for emergencies, the likelihood of a solar event causing catastrophic damage is relatively low. Our planet has a natural defense system in the form of its magnetic field, which helps to shield us from the worst effects of solar activity. While it's true that a major solar storm could cause significant disruption, the chances of a truly catastrophic event are relatively low. Most solar storms result in beautiful auroras and minor disruptions to satellite communications and power grids. These events are usually manageable and don't lead to long-term damage. Plus, as I mentioned before, scientists are keeping a close eye on the sun, and we're getting better at predicting and preparing for these events all the time. Advances in technology and our understanding of solar activity mean that we can often see these events coming and take steps to mitigate their impact. So instead of worrying, let's just appreciate the sun for what it is, a giant ball of plasma that provides us with light, warmth, and the occasional cosmic light show. The sun is essential for life on Earth, and its activity is a natural part of its life cycle. And hey, if we lose power for a little while, think of it as a forced digital detox. It could be an opportunity to reconnect with nature, spend quality time with loved ones, and enjoy the simple pleasures of life without the constant buzz of technology. So, let's not worry too much about solar storms and instead focus on making the most of the sunny days we have. So, there you have it, folks. The sun, it's big, it's powerful, and it's got a bit of a temper. But it's also essential to life on Earth, so we're stuck with it. Kind of like that one friend who's always causing trouble but whom you can't help but love. Just remember, when it comes to the sun, a little bit of drama is to be expected. So next time you see the northern lights dancing across the sky, or your GPS starts acting wonky, don't panic. Just think of it as our grumpy, gassy friend throwing a little cosmic tantrum. And hey, at least it gives us something to talk about, right?